Hi, my name is Sean Olson. Today's lesson is going to be how to use the proxy tools that are included in the Wall Worm toolset. I have two goals in this video. One, to show you the purpose of the proxy tools, and two, to show you how to use them. So in this scene here I have several models. They're just some props that I created, and we're going to turn these into Wall Worm models, and then we're going to create proxies, and then we're going to use them. To begin with is we're going to open up Wall Worm Anvil. Anvil now has a new designed interface, and if you click the Models tab, you'll see some options here for proxies and models. First, we need to turn all of these objects into Wall Worm models. In the end, what we're saying here is each one of these objects will be a model that you can open up individually inside of Model Viewer and plop them into Hammer. We're not using Hammer in this case, but it would be the same thing. So to turn all of these into models individually, what we need to do is first set some things in here. Now, it's important for what we're doing here to turn on the local origin. You can learn more about that in the docs. These are all static props that don't move, so I'm giving them the static prop flag. These are not all opaque and mostly opaque, so I'm not going to choose these settings yet. And some of them are going to be concave and some are not. For the moment, I'm going to leave those unchecked. And the surface props are different between all of these. I'm going to send all of these into a path called Wall Worm Test, and their materials also. And for the moment, they're all vertex lit generic. If I select all of these models in the scene here and hit Quick WWMT, it's going to create a Wall Worm model for all of those. So all of these now have helpers associated with them, and you can move them however you want, put them in their own layer, do whatever you want like that. Doing them in this scene like this with them all clustered, it does get hard to read, so you may want to move them out. So now I moved around my helpers so it's a little easier to see them. At this point I can change any of them individually. Some of the settings that are in here I can apply to things. For example, all of these ones here that are going to be prop details, I can say I want these to all be unlit generic. So I'm choosing that menu and then hitting this little arrow. All of those, oops, I'm sorry there, I needed to select their helpers. So this is the grass objects. So I'm selecting those helpers, and now if I choose this right arrow, all of those now have unlit generic settings. Now this window here for the model functions does not have every setting you can do with Wall Worm models, but it has a lot of the common ones. So if you need to do something that's not in these, you can still go and open up the Wall Worm model tools and select your helper, and it will pre-fill the details. And this is one of the rocks, so I could in here give this a surface property of rock. I could have done that in here too, but if there's any other setting in here that we need to put, we know that this rock is opaque, for example, it will set those for that individual thing. So now we're going to work on our scene a little bit, and let's go to the displacement tab, and we're going to change the grid spacing and size on here. I'm going to change this to 1024 by 1024 and make sure my grid snap is on. And now I'm going to add 4 displacements, a 4x4 displacement block. I'm going to create these displacements, and now I have 4 displacements in the scene, these 4 blocks here. Now what I want to do is sculpt a little landscape really quickly. If I select no displacements and hit edit mode, it will turn all of these into a sculpt mesh that I can then sculpt. One of the things that I like to do at this point is to use the freeform tools and the push-pull and let's make this a little bit bigger, and then you can just sculpt your landscape how you want. Now this is a power of 2 displacement, so the detail is not so high. So if I hit edge faces, you can see that. So what we're going to do now is go to paint alpha mode, paint some alpha on here. Actually, let's do it this way. There's a path that goes like this. Let's go back into edit mode. Let's go back to our push-pull. Let's bring this up a little bit over here. And now we have our little landscape. And now the question is, we want to get our models on here, and we want a whole bunch of them. We want to reuse them, these rocks, the trees. And what we can do is make proxies. And this is where proxies come in. We're going to go back to the model tab, and we're going to select all of these here. Now what we're about to do here only actually works on the helpers. What we're doing here only works on the helpers, but it doesn't matter that these models are selected. For all of the Wall Worm model helpers that are selected, we can hit create proxies from WWMT. If we create this, it's going to take all of those, and those are currently selected. I'm going to keep that selection and move these all over here. So at this point, these are all proxies, which are basically copies of the originals. Now, these originals I'm going to keep outside of our scene, and since they're outside of our scene and they could be in the void, which would cause a leak in your map, I'm actually going to do another step. I'm going to select all of these original WWMT helpers. I'm going to click exclude. And when I do that, that means when we export the VMF, all of these models are just ignored on the VMF exporting. They're only here for creating the models and creating the proxies. So now let's go up here and look at just our proxies. What we want to do now is start placing these objects across this scene here. And there's some pretty cool tools in Max 2012 and 13 that allow you to do that. And that's called Object Paint. And the way Object Paint works is it lets you choose a list of objects and paint them onto the scene. And you can choose what you're painting onto. So we're going to select this sculpt mesh. We still haven't committed the sculpt mesh yet. It's still one big mesh here. I'm going to tell it that it's going to paint on the selected objects. And then we need to select a list of objects to put into our paint list. So right now, I'm just actually going to paint these small boulders along the path here. So I need to pick a list of objects. And actually I'm going to select these. So these three boulders here, I'm just going to add those to the list. And now I'm going to tell it to, all of these are going to be used randomly. And we need to go back here and select this again. Make sure that it's painting on the selected objects, because we only want to paint on this mesh. Now some of these other things in here, you have to be careful when using Wall Worm. You don't want to flip the axis, and you also do not want to do any scaling. So when you're using this tool to paint proxies, do not ever scale these at all. It will not work correctly. So remember, no scaling. But you can change these, the translation and orientation. And what I actually like to do is do a random Z on certain things. In fact, these boulders, I'm going to do random on all axes. And once we have that, we can start painting on the scene. So these objects I'm going to place all along our path here. We got a thing that we didn't want there, so let's, and once we have this, we can change the spacing of these rocks on the scene here. We can give them a little bit of extra scattering. Let's scatter them a little bit in all these different angles here, and they're all rotated kind of randomly. So when we get in here and look closer, there's only 3 rocks, but that doesn't necessarily look like there's only 3 models, because they're all rotated. They kind of look different. So at this point, I could change what I'm painting. So now we're going to go and paint some of this grass. We're going to pick these 3 smaller grass pieces, and we're going to tell that to add these to the list. And we're going to go ahead and choose to paint on this again. Make sure we're paint on selected. And let's start painting that on the scene. And let's only use random Z for this paint stroke. Now this one, we need to change this to all randomly. We only use that one object. So I'm going to go ahead and undo that paint stroke and go back to all randomly because I want them all in there. And let's pump this spacing up a little bit. So now we're painting all three of my grass proxies. And we're going to paint these up like this. And we're going to scatter these out some. And they're all already rotated randomly on the Z-axis. You don't want to rotate them on the X and Y if they're a prop like this. You only want them to be sticking out from the ground most likely. And we could actually change the up and down of them just slightly so you add some variation to how they look in the scene here. Now there's a rendering bug in this one texture and this one grass here, but that's irrelevant. So basically these are all going to be prop details when I export. All of the grass will. And that's going to show you, and now we're going to show you another one of the options in the proxy tools. Let's open up Wall Worm again, Anvil here, and go back to models, and you see this prop types here. Now what that does is allows you to say with the selected Wall Worm models or proxies what kind of prop they're going to export in the VMF as. Now all of these grass should be prop static. Now if you want to apply that setting to all of the proxies of a model, what you do is you go to that model's Wall Worm helper. In this case we're going to choose the grass. We're going to choose all of the grass. So that's my yellow grass, light grass, and dark grass. And all of these are going to do to export as prop detail. And you'll see these pop up like that. I'm not going to explain the reason for that right now. So now all of these grass models will export in the VMF as prop details. And now we're going to paint some of these bigger models, the boulders, the bigger boulders. So let's change our list here. Let's remove the items that are there now. And let's select these three. Add selected. Again, I want to paint on my sculpt mesh here. So let's start painting these bigger objects along here. Scatter these out a little bit. Just give them a little bit more spacing. Okay. Now let's do the trees. Now I'm going to just pick the two small ones for now. So let's paint these guys on there. And sometimes you'll get some that aren't always aligned correctly, so we may have to tweak some of these, move them a little bit. That's fine, because once they're placed, you can always just move them around if you want. So now let's put some of these bigger trees in. Let's add these to the list. In fact, let's add the boulders to the list also. The bigger, let's add everything to this list, except for these grasses here. So now on the back side here, we may want to just start painting all of these. So the object paint tool can be laggy at times. You may notice a little bit of lag in the performance of it, but it's something that you can in the end it optimizes the entire workflow enough that you can deal with some temporary lag. But now we have this whole scene here. There's only a few models, but we were able to paint them across the scene in a more natural, realistic way, and of course we can tweak them. If you need a path to be along through here, that's simple enough. We can paint alpha on here, and once these models are all in here, we can go and say, you know what, this needs to be over here, and you can move them around as you need to. So that is why we want to use proxies. Now, of course, you'll have to see what this looks like when we go into source. So we're going to get out of edit mode here. And save my file. Now what we have to do is export all of these models first. And there's a really quick and easy way to do that. So to get all of our models in there real quickly, we can open up Anvil, go to the Models tab. We can select all of our Wall Worm model tool helpers, and we have extra things selected here beyond the helpers, but that's fine, it doesn't matter. There's this quick compile button here. If we click this button, it's going to compile all of these. Now I do recommend that you save your scene before you press this. There have been times if there's too many models and you're compiling too many at once, it can potentially run out of memory and crash Mac. So, you'll have to determine on your own system. I think this will be fine here. Now when you do this, you do have to make sure that Steam is running. If Steam is not running, then it's not going to work. It won't compile them correctly. So it's going through and compiling all of these. And once they're all compiled, then we can export our scene into a VMF. So we got this, notice that all of them were exported. Now we can export a scene. Now notice these ones are all going to be excluded. These proxies, however, out here in the middle of nowhere, they're still going to export. And I'll leave them there just to show you how this works. But before we send it in there, I'm going to add a couple more things. We can add a daylight system. We can add this compass rose in here. And add a sun coming down. And whatever angle we have this coming from, say it's like that, that should be our light environment angle when we export it into VMF. And before I forget, we also need to export the textures, which I didn't do yet. So again, just like with the models, we select all of the helpers that are in the scene that belong to the models, and then we just hit all textures in this compile option here. So it's going to go through and compile all the textures. So we've got all the textures exported, and we're going to go ahead and quickly seal this map up and actually demonstrate this. So I'm going to turn the grid snapping onto a smaller size here. Actually, I'm going to do, and I'm going to create some boxes to seal my map in. So first we're going to put some ground material here. Let's seal this in a little bit. Okay, that's good enough. And we'll go ahead and put a sky texture on the we'll tell it that these side ones are skies. So I've applied the skies. Now, in order to get brush geometry to export with Wall Worm tools, you need to go to the Tags tool, and I'm going to select. I have these these boxes selected that are part of the sky. I need to say that that's a world geometry. I click there, I added it, and I'm going to add this bottom geometry as world geometry. That lets it know that this is supposed to be convex world brushes. If you don't do that, it won't export. So now we can just export this as a VMF. I'm going to save. I'm going to hit export as VMF. I'm actually not going to compile right now. I'm just going to send it into Hammer. And let's call this proxy demonstration .vmf, and let's open that up in Hammer. Proxy demonstration VMF. Alright, so here's our scene. All of our rocks that are models here, and you'll see that the grass, and sorry, it's not awesome grass, it's all a prop detail because I chose prop detail for it. Most of these may actually be prop dynamic. The default seems to be prop dynamic right now. I need to change it to prop static, but you can easily do that with the proxy tools. Go ahead and tell them all to be prop statics. You can also select individual proxies and give them a certain type too. So here it is, and of course you see that because we have that block down here that's buttered up against the displacement, but you'll have to fix that yourself. So again, my name is Sean Olson, and these are the Wall Worm tools. Hopefully this gave you some food for thought and gave you a little bit of understanding on how to use the proxy tools. I'll be writing some more documentation and about using them in the future. They're still kind of early in development, and a lot of people don't know how to use them yet, but I think you'll find them to be very useful. You can learn more about me at my website, SeanOlson.net, and you can also find my tools at wallworm.com. Also, don't forget to join the Wall Worm forums at wallworm.net. And, you know, if you really enjoy these tools, remember, you can always give a donation to help encourage me to continue developing these. Thank you, and have a good day.